How's it going, human community? I'm Mark. I'm the guy who's been trying to make a little bit of a splash on YouTube lately. You can see my dog Ruby here. Kind of a bit of a spoiled doggy for all the snuggles. Anyways, a few people in my club had expressed interest in seeing a basic comparison between this black horse fetter and this Regenier fetter that I have, just to get a basic idea of what sort of things you want to look for when you're shopping for swords, or when you pick up a sword and you try to feel it, you know, what sort of stuff you're looking for. So I'm just going to make a real quick video on that sort of thing, if I can move around with my dog here. You okay? Alright. Alright. So obviously one of the first things you're going to want to look at is the relative size comparisons between these two. The Regenier is a couple inches longer, mostly in the blade. Pick that up. Alright, and this is the sort of thing, I'm just going to start out by listing things that you can see on the websites and that sort of stuff. So makers tend to be really good about, you know, saying how long the blade is, how long the handle is. Sometimes they don't list total length, but you know, it's a thing. You can usually math that out. Okay, so the black horse is 50 inches long total, and the Regenier is about 52. Okay, there's that basic thing. The black horse has a balance point right about here at the shield, or in front of the shield. You can see that. Whereas this Regenier here, it's the crown shaped shield, which I find in my experience tend to be a bit more blade heavy. It's a little bit past the shield, and it's definitely farther forward than the black horse fetter is. Alright. Another thing you're going to want to look at are things like the cross length and the general shape too. See if you would find that comfortable when you're fencing and using it, and also the hilt length. Now in my club and among a lot of other people in the community, we're starting to realize that for swords of two-hand, you know, like long swords, montante, that sort of thing, the handle shouldn't be any more than about 25% of the length of the total sword, like even including the pommel, because you know, it's early Licton hour. We don't like to grip it. To grip the pommel like a lot of other people do. Meyer. Anyways. So the Regenier, I want to say, I forget, I think it's about 11 or 12 inches long, including the pommel here. And the black horse is at about 10 inches, including the pommel. And if I sort of hold them up together, see if I can do this. The Regenier is just barely long enough, and that, well, longer than the black horse, and that's mainly just because of the pommel. Alright? And then, another thing you're going to want to try to gauge as best you can is the shape of the grip. That's going to be hard because most makers tend to not talk about that very much. You sort of have to end up waiting until you get it. I mentioned before that the Regenier is very broad, although narrow, so it very much encourages a V-shaped grip like this. However, your fingers want to lay flat on the sides as well. With the black horse design, and I think Ensifer fetters are sort of like this too, but with a lot less girth, it allows the curvature of your fingers to wrap around a little bit better because it's not as narrow and sharp on this plane. Okay, so we talked about that. You probably want to look for pommel shapes as well, although really only experimentation is going to tell you what sort of pommel shape you're going to like. Oh, I forgot to talk about cross shapes and how they may or may not be comfortable. So the Regeniers are very basic in their cross shape. There's a little bit of a bump here and a very small gap where the top of the cross is and the blade starts. So if you're thumb gripping, it's not going to be particularly uncomfortable if it's smoothed well enough, so you won't have to build any calluses or get any blisters by doing a thumb grip. Black horse has a bit of a different design. It thick handle, and then has a lot more space and clearance. So if you're going to want a thumb grip on the blade, you're going to dig into the finger a little bit more. But it all comes down to how you want to grip your sword. Some people like to choke back on it more, and others like me like to grip it up here. So if you thumb grip when you're choked back, you end up more like this, which is totally fine. Okay, so there's that. Now next you're going to want to look into things like flex. Now this is the sort of thing where you're not going to really get a very good gauge online most of the time. You'll have to do some digging. So this Regenia here, let's test its flexibility. Yeah, it's a pretty stiff sword, which is actually a good thing. I don't like them flopping around when they're being used. Look at the Black Horse. Yep, it's pretty stiff too. Actually feels like it's a little bit easier to bend, which is surprising. Another way you can try to bend it is on the ground. Take it and you push down. Sort of gauge that as well. So we take the Black Horse here. That. I don't know if the camera's picking that up. I might have to reshoot that later. Okay, so let's see. We talked about blade balance, cross shape, hilt length. Right, so let's talk about vibrational nodes, i.e. the sweet spot. Now, a lot of people, when they pick up a sword, they like to do this to see where this flexes. Well, this isn't actually a very useful test, because it really doesn't matter that much how it's going to flex in this plane when you're cutting things, because, well, quite frankly, not all the time are you going to be getting smashed directly on the flat. That's what your opponent wants to do, but you're not necessarily going to let them know, are you? However, that can be valuable when you're trying to determine how well it may or may not perform in the mind. The only problem with that is that there are a lot of different variables that go into that sort of thing. Sort of like a grip length, you know, the closer your hands are together, the more power you're going to have in your cuts. The farther away they are, you'll have more leverage to hold the sword. And the more flexible it is in this plane, the less presence or strength you're going to have in a bind. You're going to have to really work your edge alignment mechanics in it. So that's something to be mindful of. So if we pop this one, it may just be me. It looks like this one wobbles a little bit more. It's hard to say. Can let you guys decide on that sort of thing. What else? So we want to cover the wobble. Now the real thing that you're going to get out of doing this sort of hilt test here is you're going to figure out where the sweet spot is in the handle as well. Now, some people may ask, well, why is that important? Well, when your blade's getting hit, you've got a lot of vibration going down the sword into your arms, in your wrist, in your hand, all that. And so the more movement that's going on in the handle side to side, the more you're going to feel that, and the more you're going to struggle in the bind or resisting other people's swords. So a good thing to do is to look and see where the sword isn't moving. And I found that with this Regenia, the sweet spot is right about here in the center. So if I strike it, there's almost no movement in my hand when I center my hand on that spot. It's pretty far down. So you're going to feel vibration a lot of the time. It's not going to be a big thing because it's a stiff sword and it's very well made. But that's something that if you're very detail oriented, it's something to look out for. With the Black Horse, alright, so look at that, shift it a little bit down about here. Yeah, there's almost no movement here. So here it is. Yeah. So that's where the grip is going to be with the least vibration in the handle. And if you grip it there, your thumb ends up coming right to the cross. So if you're one of those people who likes to choke back, it's a pretty good sword for you. Alright, that's basically everything there is to compare with swords. Now the reason I made this is not to compare Regenia and Black Horse as swords, because quite frankly that would be a very unfair comparison for both of them, because they are priced and designed and engineered and built with specific and different things in mind. So I'm not going to be giving any opinions on which I think is better. I'm just going to let you decide, you know, on your own, if you so wish to do that. This isn't meant to be a competition video, more of a comparison just to show what sort of differences you can see in swords and sort of things to look out for when you're shopping. In the future, I'm hoping to do more things involving points of rotation. However, I'm not particularly learned on that particular subject, so I'm going to stave off from talking about it for now. But yeah, that's pretty much everything there is that I can think of right now to talk about these particular things. On the sites, you're going to want to try to see what kind of steel they're made out of. You know, you're going to want to look for the kind of tip. You know, it's becoming more well known, especially in my club, that rolled tips are a pretty common failure point. So some people might want to just go safe with a lobe or a spatulated tip or whatever, but rolled tips aren't all that bad. But if your sword fails, it's very likely going to be there, or at a bad heat-treated spot in the hilt or something. And yeah, that seems like about it. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I hope you found this useful, or at the very least entertained, to see me struggling around trying to figure out how to compare these various things. But yeah, I've been Mark, and hope you got something out of this, and I will catch you later. Take care. I freaking knew I would forget something. Anyways, just to add a few other points as well, I also decided to bring out this Hanwei Practical Bastard Sword to show off a few things as well. Some things to consider as well: weight, overall weight, combined with a balance point, that can either make a sword very strong in the bind and have a lot of presence, and it can also make it very weak in the bind and not have a lot of presence. It can also affect things like agility and all sorts of other things. So this sword that I like to train with is very heavy. It's at least 3.5 pounds, if I remember correctly. It's also engineered to be a reenactment blunt and not really a sword to spar with, because I tell you what, man, combined with a balance point about this far from the handle, this thing hits like a truck. The one thing I really do like about the sword is the relatively short handle. Still, it allows you some grip length, so you can spar with, or rather train with gloves on, but it allows you, it encourages a very specific style of cutting, so you can actually get the oomph into it that you need. Another thing that people tend to be sticklers about is construction method, like how it's constructed, like the peen. So some swords are peened, like this Hanwei and the Regenye. I don't know if you can see that. This is actually a very, it's a pretty clean peen on this Regenye here. And then others, like the Black Horse, are threaded. You know, and as you're probably aware, they all have their advantages and disadvantages. Peens tend to last very long because they're very stable, but threads allow you to take the sword apart and do repairs on it much more easily, because you don't have to heat up the peen and slide everything off. You can just unscrew it, take it apart, do whatever fixes you need to, put it back together, done. Then, of course, there are disadvantages to the threaded as well. It can come undone during use eventually, and eventually you'll end up tightening the nuts so much that you'll be damaging the hilt. I don't think that's necessarily going to be a problem with the Black Horse, but I'll discuss that in the review. Anyways, though, then there's also the downside to the stability of the peen, in that even if the peen itself is stable, the hilt components, i.e. the wood and the handle cover, may not be. So eventually you might get crack and wear and tear and stuff in the handle, and if you need to take it apart, then it's a bit of a pain in the ass. So there's that to cover as well. And finally, there's something that is actually kind of minor when you're looking at swords, but it's something I like to look for, is if a sword has fuller in it or not. And you might think, you know, why does that matter? This is why. Versus, got 3 swords here I'm trying to juggle, versus, so with a fullered blade, it allows the air to travel around the entire blade in a certain way, and it really projects the whistle when you get your edge alignment and your cutting mechanics right. Whereas with a a flat stock like the Regenye and many other makers out there with just a rolled tip, all the noise you're getting is coming from the tip, and it's really hard to make it out. So if you're solo training and you really try to use that sound as feedback in order to, figure out if your cuts are good and where you need to improve them, then something with a deep fuller like this and this Hanwei here is actually pretty good. The Fuller isn't that great, but I've noticed it tends to be a bit more noisy than other swords, and rude neighbors over here honking at somebody. Anyways, that now I'm pretty sure is about everything that I can be said about various swords and things. So yeah, hopefully you found it useful, and I will see you in the next video. Take care, folks.